Welcome to this video. Today what we're going to do is we're going to do a problem in the StatHelper using the normal distribution. So you can see here I'm already in the StatHelper, so let's go take a look at the actual problem. Now usually when you're dealing with the normal distribution like this, you're trying to do one of two things. You're either given a value for x and you're trying to find a probability, or you're given a probability and you're trying to find the value for x. So let's take a look at the question. Suppose the diameter of trees of a certain type is normally distributed with mean equal to 8.8 inches and standard deviation equal to 2.8 inches. So part A says, what is the probability that the diameter of a randomly selected tree will be at most 10 inches? So what we're going to do is we're now going to go over to the StatHelper to see how we do this problem. Now we're over here in the StatHelper. Notice we've started out on the welcome screen. What you're going to want to do is you want to come over here to the sidebar, and since we're doing a problem on the normal probability distribution, we're going to want to go up here to probability distributions. Now we're here. Technically you have three different distributions that you can do problems with. We're going to choose normal distribution. Notice here that the first 3 or 4 tabs that you see are going to give you things like instructions, description of the normal distribution, tips, and example, etc. Okay, you can take some time to go through that if you wish. We're going to want to go straight to part A. We're going to click Start. Here is where you're going to put in all your information. The first thing we're going to put in is the mean, which in this case was 8.8. Now we're going to put in the standard deviation, which was 2.8. Now, since we're dealing with a single diameter or a single measurement or a single observation, then the sample size here will be 1. Now we're going to come up here to the probability symbol. The problem said we were looking for at most, which means less than or equal to, so we will keep that as is. We're also looking for a probability, so we would leave this set to probability as well. And the last thing that we need to do here is we need to put in what the given x value is. And the problem said we were looking for at most 10, so we're going to put 10 here. Take a second to take a look at this input box just to see where everything is. If you need to, pause the video, but we're going to click Run and look for the output. Notice it takes you directly to the Work tab. This tab will give you all the work you need to see in order to do the problem. You can see here we're doing the probability x is less than or equal to 10. If you go through, we find that the answer is 0.6664. This is what you need to use for part A of the problem. Now let's go back to the problem itself and take a look and see what part B says. Okay, we're back here at the problem statement. Part B here says, what's the probability that the diameter of a randomly selected tree will exceed 5 inches, which of course means greater than 5 inches. Okay, let's go back to the StatHelper and see how we get this information. Now, we're back in the StatHelper. Notice here, everything is the way we left it. Now, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to put different information in, so you're going to have to basically reset everything. So in order to do that, we're going to click the Reset the Inputs button. Now notice basically most of these things that you click on will basically say you need to update your data, press the Start button. So you'll start to see this pattern with the StatHelper where when you're ready to begin, you can hit the Start button, input your inputs, click Run. When you want to do something different, you reset the inputs with the Reset button and then click the Start button again. So let's go click the Start button. Again, we have this box. Remember, our mean was 8.8. Standard deviation was 2.8. We're still dealing with a sample size of 1. Now, remember for part B, what we want to know is x being greater than 5. When you click on this, there isn't anything here for greater than. That's because with the normal distribution being a continuous distribution, the probability that it's greater than 5 and the probability that it's greater than or equal to 5 are actually the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose greater than or equal to. The desired output is still a probability, but now what we'll put in here is 5. Again, take a minute to look this over to see how it all works. If you need to, pause the video. Now we'll click Run. And again, this will take us to the Work tab. You can see we're looking for the solution for the probability x is greater than or equal to 5. You can basically take the time to go through this, and what we find is the probability x is greater than or equal to 5 is equal to 0.9131. Okay, that's the answer for part B. Now let's move on and go back and take a look at part C. We're back to the problem again. Part C here says, what is the probability that the diameter of a randomly selected tree will be between 5 and 10 inches? So now what we're going to need to do is we're going to go back to the StatHelper and see how we deal with this situation where you're looking for a probability between two numbers. Okay, now we're back here again in the StatHelper. We're basically where we left off in the previous part of the question. Remember now to move forward with the part C, we're going to need to reset the inputs, so we're going to click the reset button. Now we're going to click start. Once again, remember this is the same box we've been seeing every time. Input the mean to be 8.8. Input the standard deviation to be 2.8. Again, we're still dealing with a single sample. Now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to change this so that we want between two numbers. So when we click on this, we come down here, we choose the between two numbers. Now, when we click that, notice what happens. We have inputs actually for both values of x, where we didn't have that before because we only needed one value. We're going to leave desired output as probability because we're still looking for that. We're going to put the smaller number here, which is 5. We'll put the larger number here, which is 10. Remember, that happened because we chose between two numbers instead of greater than or less than. Again, take a minute to look this over to make sure you understand each piece, and pause the video if need be, but let's take a look at the results. Okay, we're on the Work tab, like with the other problems. Notice here we're looking for the probability that x is greater than or equal to 5, but less than or equal to 10. Here are the calculations you can go through. And we come down here to the bottom, and to find the answer for part C, it's actually going to be 0.5795. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the problem one last time to take a look at part D. Now we're back here again at the problem. Let's look at part D. Part D says, what diameter value does 95% of the data fall below? Now this is a little bit different than all of the value or all of the problem parts that we've done so far. So far everything has been, here's an x, what's the probability? Now we're going to look at, here's a probability, now find the value for x. So let's go back to the StatHelper and see how we do this. Now again, we're back to the StatHelper where we left off. What we're going to need to do is reset the inputs. Now we're going to click Start. Again, same box we've seen for the other parts. The mean is 8.8. Standard deviation 2.8. We still have a single x value. Okay, now when we get to the other side, things change a little bit. Now what we're going to do is, since we want to know what x value 95% of the values fall below, that means we want to choose less than or equal to. But what's going to change now is we're no longer looking for probability. Now we're looking for a value. So we're going to click on value. Now we have to input the given probability. So we're going to input 0.95. Okay. Again, take a look at this. Notice one other thing about this is when you input the given probability, you have to, you don't want to necessarily input it as a whole number. You want to input it as a decimal. That's why you see it as 0.95 here. Okay. So take a look. Make sure you understand what's going on. If need be, pause the video, but let's take a look at the result. Now again, in this case, we're looking for the value of this x so that this equation equals 0.95. Okay. If you start to look through this, you'll see what we did here in terms of the solutions. And what we basically find is the value that 95% of the data fall below is 13.392. Okay. So this is the answer for part D.